Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Advanced Research Methods class. I'm Farhan Sarwar, and today we will look at the remaining portion of research proposal development. Okay, so in our previous lecture we were discussing about different types of research proposal, and I have also uploaded another lecture about how to write an academic research proposal, and you should also refer to that video. You will be able to understand how to write a research proposal if you need to do. So let's move forward. So our next topic is request for proposal. Sometimes when companies or sponsors they require someone else to do some research for them. For instance, a very large organization may have a separate corporate research department, so they can always invite some external research supplier to perform this function for them. Uh, or a manager may hire some external company, or a government agency may ask different people to submit request for research. So at that time a document is issued which is called research for proposal. This document invites a qualified researcher to submit a proposal, a research proposal, uh, in accordance with some specific and detailed format. So how will the researcher knows how what type of research proposal they need to make? So all that is mentioned in request for proposal. And of course this proposal have to be delivered by a certain deadline. So you may have seen different advertisements in the newspapers or over internet that certain research agencies they issue um, a call for research proposals. So that is also kind of a research request for proposal document, or RFP. Normally in the business world, this RFP is a very formal document and you have to follow certain guidelines. And why this is important to have a common format? Because then everyone know what they can submit, what are the requirements, that if they are bidding for a certain research project, so what are the requirements they have to fulfill. And each firm has its own requirements, and they are actually reflected in the RFPs. For example, if a government is issuing an request for proposal, it is required by law that they have to publicly announce it. And sometimes some private firms may limit their bidders to those who they have known before, they have worked before. Or maybe sometimes if you can invite a single bidder, you can always ask them to fill a request for proposal, uh, so that they can know what are the requirements of your research proposal. So what document is submitted in response to a request for proposal is a research proposal. So this figure in front of you basically explains different steps in an organization that starts from research question to actual start of research. So how can we lead from a research problem to research question? We have discussed that in our previous lectures. And now when a research question is generated and we have done budget evaluation, which we will discuss next, then we have two paths. Either we can hire an external research supplier, and for that reason we can develop and distribute some external RFPs, or we can develop internal research proposal, which is on the right hand side if you can see the diagram. Okay, so if we have to develop an external uh, research supplier, if we have to invite an external research supplier on the left hand side, so you develop and distribute some externals request for proposals, and there is a certain format that we will discuss next. And then we when we receive those RFPs by some deadline, then we can review the alternative suppliers proposals, and based upon the criteria that we have set, we may accept any one of them, and then we may go to the approval of budget, and then we may award that research contract to that external supplier who would start the research. On the other hand, if we prefer the internal supplier because we cannot afford that, or we have a very good in-house research facility, then we may directly proceed to the budget approval and design phase. And uh, and as we discussed before, that if that is not in our budget, it's not feasible for the organization, we make decision without research. Or in case if we are uh, in the position that we can carry out this research and the design is also uh, acceptable to us, then we may proceed with a research which is carried out internally. If you look at the top of this figure, uh, sometimes if the budget is not available, we may make a decision without going through the process of research. And in that case, managers may often use some intuitive approach, or may consult some previous decisions that are made without collecting the data, without going through the research process and trying to understand the roots of the problem, the causes of the problem. They can just take a decision using their common sense. Every RFP or request for proposal has some general components. Of course, they are not as fixed or as rigid, but sometimes if the project is very large scale, then we may have to include most of these uh, headings or components in your RFP. So first of all, there is a proposal administration information, which is just most of time an introductory information. It includes an overview of some important information regarding RFPs, such as the on which date this RFP was released, and when and where and how the team that has made this RFP documents, and of course that team belongs to the sponsor, when they will be available for queries, how to contact them, and an important thing is the due date at which this proposal should be submitted, and when the by what date it will be evaluated, and what are the different criterias on which the research supplier will be selected. And there can be a long list of requirements and evaluation criteria in this particular section, and of course the contact names and addresses of the companies also found in this section. Then there is a summary statement of the problem. Of course, every RFP is generated because of some managerial, or mostly because of some managerial issue, but sometimes some funding agencies can also have a request for proposal when there is a academic issue at hand, or it can be a national or government issue as well. And this summary statement can have some components uh, that is actually, it's kind of an abstract, it's not a very detailed portion. So it can have some summary of the technical section, some summaries of the functional requirements, and what can be the limitations or constraints. So it's basically a summary section, and it is often included on the first page before the technical section started. It can be also in a form of a letter, uh, which also introduces the organization as well. That what is the organization, who is the sponsor. For example, if it's a university who is asking for RFPs, or introduction of a university can also be included in the summary statement of the problem. Third is the technical section. The technical section basically it highlights the problem, research problem upon which the request for proposal is called upon, and there can be a technical details of each requirement. If we go through some RFPs, some sample RFPs, we will able to understand what kind of technical requirements can be written over there, and depending upon the type of the research, these technical requirements may vary. It also highlights, this section also highlights what kind of services we expect from the one who is supposed to carry out research for us, what kind of equipment, software, and documentation can be required. So these three things, that problem statement, description of the function requirement, which means what actual phases will be included in the research, starting from literature review to data collection to data analysis and results, and all those processes can be included a bit of course it's not as detailed because those detailed processes will be mentioned in the research proposal. RFP is actually a call for proposal, and some constraint, financial constraints of course budget constraints are always there, and constraints of uh, it can also mention that there are some cultural constraints, there are some ethical constraints, and there are always limitations to every project. So the supplier should know that they have to limit their creativity under all these constraints. Then there is a management section in RFP. There the sponsor basically mentions about schedules, plans, and some reports that are already available regarding their problem, and then it also highlights the requirement, that what they require from the supplier to provide them, which include schedules, trainings, reporting schedules, quality control, and other documents that they expect the supplier to provide them in the RFP. And it also highlights the required qualification to be a research supplier or provide research services to a particular firm, and then they can also require some websites. They can also highlight some websites that were useful information relevant to their proposal. They can also look for also provide some sources where the supplier can look for some more information relevant to the research that they have to submit a proposal for. So these kind of things are in the management section. Then we have uh, we can also provide what type of contract we will sign with the supplier, some non-disclosure agreements like keeping the secrecy of the research, not to leak out the information regarding, or that can be a sensitive information regarding the organization. These types of contracts, some legal contracts can be over there, and copyrights can be also mentioned here, because sometimes you in the research you use some material which is copyrighted, so you have to either get a copyright of your own if you are making something new, or you have to get permission from those whose materials you are using, whose questionnaires you are using, whose um, patents you are using for your experiments, and you have to get their permission, or you have to may have to pay some price to get that specific material. And you can also mention some benchmarks, some evaluation criteria on which this particular research can be called a good quality research or a bad quality research at this in this particular contract and license section. Pricing is of course important, because if someone is providing you the service, they would expect to get some financial benefit. That is why they are getting giving you some service. So there is always a need, as you know, and being a management student, you can appreciate the fact that this portion actually should be as detailed and as comprehensive as possible. So uh, in this section, the sponsors can highlight the cost of the proposal, and the suppliers should have a know-how of how much they expect to get paid for different services like report preparation, data collection, computers, data analysis, project management, clients, meeting with clients, traveling, questionnaires, manpower. Um, Sometimes you need to you know, when you're collecting some data, you have to give the respondents some incentives. How much budget can be available for mails and telephones, meetings, and different types of things that are related to that can be related to a project. And not everything is in every research project. For example, sometimes you need training and brochures, and literature access can also cost you a lot of money, and videos can be one of the cost in a research project. So depending upon the scope of the project, the extent of the project, this pricing section can have lot of classifications on which the pricing can be done. So like every report, there is a format by which you can write an RFP. Um, these are some of the headings that you can mention in the RFP, and these headings can be a bit flexible. So depending about the components, if you're adding in your RFP, you can have starting with instruction to the bidder, then background information, the company's profile, overall project overview, project requirement. Then you can also provide detailed uh, information about your company or your the sponsors organization, and some proposed solutions that can be also part of the RFP services and support, and cost proposal. So as we have previously discussed some components of an RFP, so you can try to fit all those components according to this format, or can have some other format which are always available as a sample when you start making some professional RFPs. So budget is an important part of every project. Every organization tries to avoid losses and increase their sales and profit. Similarly, if uh, the manager expects a research study, they would expect that this study is basically helping them to avoid financial losses and increase their financial performance. Otherwise, as far as the organizational perspective is concerned, this research can be wasteful. If we are carrying out an action research, perhaps this is an important aspect. If we are carrying out a pure academic research, maybe this is not as important. Even then, large scale academic projects do have budget constraints, and if we are to carry out some project, some experiment, some survey, then we need to know how much this is going to cost. So budgeting is always important in any kind of research project. Either it is an academic project, either even PhDs, MPhils are actually sometimes constrained by budget. They need to travel a lot to collect their data, to conduct a survey, or they need to purchase a certain software, they need to purchase certain literature. So budget constraint and budget is always important for a research project. As far as large scale organizational research projects are concerned, the decision maker always wants that there should be a firm cost estimate for a project, and that cost estimate should be precise enough that you're able to know for which which particular part of research design or research process, how much can be allocated, and they should also know that how much value their research is going to provide them. So there should be an estimate of how much financial gain an organization can get from a particular research project. And now when a researcher gives a budget estimate, then of course it's go through a process of budget approval. And as we know, if there is no budget approval, or if there is the budget approval is not uh, according to the main requirements or according to the firm's requirement, they may go to there may be a termination of the research project due to budget constraint. So if you want you need 1 million to carry out research project, and the organization is giving you 500,000, of course then your project cannot be completed, or maybe there is a compromise on quality. So so this portion is always quite hectic, for especially for large scale project. And of course when it's a external project, external consultant is hired, there's a different budget requirements. If an internal or in-house researchers are doing investigation, then these resources are used in a different way. And it is always a researcher's task to justify the cost of the project. And it is also their one of the headache of a researcher to identify from where they can get the budget, from where they can get the funding. And if they are getting a funding, then how can they justify different aspects of their research. Now when we are talking about that, which part of research is getting you is most expensive, is the costliest. So we don't know actually. There is not a fixed question. Sometimes people think that data collection is the costliest part, but as a matter of fact, answer can be yes or no, because it depends upon the research design. Sometimes you are doing a research in which you have to collect data from a survey in from respondents who are geographically dispersed. So if they're geographically dispersed, maybe you have to travel a lot, or maybe the nature of research survey is such that you have to give some incentives to your respondents. So maybe then survey or data collection is the costliest part. Sometimes you are doing a laboratory research in which you need some sophisticated equipment. Of course, in that case also experimentation is the most expensive part. Sometimes analyses are such that you need to acquire certain preparatory softwares. These softwares may cost you lot of money. There is a chance that you hire an external consultant on your research. Maybe that consultant is going to charge you more than any other component of the research process. So again it depends upon the type of the research and the scope of the research, which will help us to understand that which of our part is going to cost us how much. As you can see in front of you is a example of a research budget. There are different items, and there are some estimates, some per unit estimate or per hour estimate. There is an estimate of how many days are these going to take, and the charge and total. So this is just as a budget of any other project that you will know how to make. And especially I expect that as a management student you have a know-how of how to prepare a budget. This process is exactly similar to preparing a budget for any other project. Uh, when we are talking about business research, there is always an issue for organization that how much budget they can allocate for research. So one author identifies that there can be three approaches that an organization may adopt to allocate budget for the research activities. There can be rule of thumb budgeting, which involves a fixed percentage. For instance, that a department may allocate previous years a percentage of previous year sales for the research budget or marketing research budget for the next year. So that can be one of the approach, or there can be budgeting uh, in departmental or functional total budget. They may allocate a portion of their total expenditures to research activities. This is how most of the government agencies and some NGOs and some organizations in private sectors, they manage their research budgets. So they allocate a portion of their total expenditures, a certain percentage uh, of their total expenditures to research. And there can be a task budgeting as well, which is mostly an ad hoc budgeting. When it is required, you can always call upon, you can get some new budget allocation which was not previously done because a need has arisen. And obviously this kind of budgeting needs to justify the cost and the benefit, that if you are really doing this out of the way budgeting, then this project should benefit organization in some way or other. In our previous lecture of research proposal, and this is part 2 of that lecture, we discussed about scheduling, an important aspect of every research proposal, and as was the budget that we discussed in previous slides. So we saw that a Gantt chart, and I showed you an example of a Gantt chart, can be one way in which a schedule can be portrayed. So another method can be CPM, or a critical path model. It's not a complex diagram. It's just a path diagram in which there is a start and then there is an end on the most right hand side, as you can see in blue color. So you always can have parallel paths and you always can have some critical paths. So as you can see, you start with number 1 is your critical path, and like 3 is part of the critical path, and 4, 7, 8, 9. So you can start from here, go to 1, and then go to 3, and then go to 4, and then go to 7, 8, 9. So these are the critical paths that you need to observe for your project. Then you have certain milestones that you declare, and obviously these milestones can have different meanings. For instance, maybe if you have allocated this project to a research supplier, this milestone may mean that you have to pay a certain amount at this point, pay another amount at this point, and pay a certain percentage at this point. So this is actually the completion of your project. And if it's an in-house CPM, then perhaps it identifies that these are the important steps that were completed. And these past diagrams are important for us to understand that how we have to go about doing certain things. You start interviewing client, you start literature review, allocate this portion to some members of research team, allocate number 5 to some portion of research team, allocate then allocate number 10 to someone, allocate number 3 to someone. So as you move, you understand that how you will proceed about completing your research project as a full-fledged research project. And there is a chance that you may have to change certain paths during the process to adjust for some uncertainties, some changes, um, some last minute changes from the sponsors perhaps. But again, these charts are part of the planning process, and you appreciate the fact that for any manager, planning is the most important part, because on it all the building of other functions, organizing, leading, and controlling, actually stands. Okay, so before we wrap up the second part of this two lecture series for research proposal, I would like you to take a look at a sample research proposal. Of course, this is a miniature research proposal which I have copied from Business Research Methods book by Cooper, and this is actually for a real organization, Mindwriter Corporation, complete care program. So it starts with a research proposal. You might want to take pause this video and take a look at what is written in this research proposal. I'm not going to read it out. My motive is to show you that how a research proposal actually written. So start with a problem statement, the real problem that on which this research proposal is working. So perhaps this is problem that mind writer would be facing, and then from the problem statement you derive your research objectives, and there you would be able to understand that how a research problem is converted into a research objective. And and here this research proposal mentions the importance, benefits, the heading can be significance as well of this research. What do you expect as the outcome of this research? Then this is research design. All these research designs aspect we will explore in our subsequent lectures. So what kind of research is of they have mentioned this is an exploratory research. The research design will be qualitative. There will be a questionnaires as well. But of course, if it's a qualitative research, then there is a chance that this is um, an open-ended questionnaire, and the sample size would be low. As you can see, is 12 questions only, and then they have mentioned the logistics, that how will this survey be carried on, about the pilot testing, and some things that are related to research designs we will explore in our subsequent lectures. How the data will be analyzed, uh, what is the data analysis approach, what kind of uh, software they plan to use, they can mention in this um, research proposal. If you read the last line, it reads out, the open-ended question will be summarized and responded by model code. If you wish, you can also provide content analysis for these questions. So this is how the uh, one who is presented the research proposal has mentioned that uh, if the sponsors want something extra, they can also provide that in the research outcome. And then what will be delivered, what will be the product that they will deliver as the result of this research project. So they will develop and produce an online questionnaire, weekly exception reports, and then monthly reports, and then upload each month's data. And this is how they will start delivering the research outcomes to their organization. And at the last, there is a budget, uh, proposed budget in the research proposal. So that was all about research proposal, RFPs, and research budget. And this most of this was with perspective of business studies, but some of these are as also applicable to the academic research proposal. Although academic research proposal may not be that much elaborated, but even then, uh, there are few things that we have discussed are also part of the research that you may do in your PhDs or in your MPhils. However, this information would be very much helpful for your research that you will carry out in your jobs, your professional jobs, as a businessman yourself, as a self-employed. You would always need to get some research work done, and you can appreciate that how the proposal is prepared, how different aspects of the research proposal are handled, how you can proceed to next research process, that is literature review and research design. And obviously literature review is actually part of research proposal, but we will discuss them in our subsequent lectures. And research design is also part of a research proposal. uh, how the research will be carried out, most of these things in the planning phase are put in the research proposal. So thank you, take care, Allah Hafiz.